I'm Mike Quackenbush, and this is Till We Make It. If you are passionate about pro wrestling and you're never done learning all about it, then you've landed in the exact right place. What are you waiting for? Go ahead and join the Till We Make It tribe. Subscribe right now. Thanks to my newest patrons who just joined me over on Patreon: Alex, Jake, and Rolando. And then up at the Troubadour level, I was just joined by Philman. Thank you very much. And all the way up at the Master Tier level, I was just joined by Sean. Thank you, Sean. Thank you, one and all, for your patronage and support. It's only through the support of my awesome patrons that Till We Make It continues. A link to where you can join is down below in the descriptus. Here in the US, it's Autism Awareness Month, and I often get asked questions about opportunities in professional wrestling for people who are on the autism spectrum. And that's why I asked my friend Steven Weiner to join me for a conversation in today's episode. And you're going to hear all about his story, from training to actually performing in the ring, from Steven himself. Our conversation is right now. Steven, thanks for making time to chat with me today. A quick little background, if people aren't familiar. Over the last 18 to 19 years almost, you've wrestled in roughly 500 matches. So you've been active in the ring. Of course, you're active in all kinds of facets of wrestling, but I want to focus a little bit on the in-ring stuff for you. But let's go back to the beginning of your story. When you were just starting out, Steven, did you find maybe trainers or coaches that were reluctant to train you because of your autism?
Well, thinking back on it, I officially began training in, oddly enough, my official start day was my birthday on September 1st, 2024.
Wow.
Me and my parents discovered Slam Tech University, which is now defunct, even though my trainer, Bob Evans, still teaches seminars to this day.
He's still out there.
Out there. I will be talking about Bob a lot throughout this video, so everyone gets to Bob Evans. And it just started there. But at the time, you know what, to start, I probably should go into a long history of, I was born on September 21st, 1983. Very early on, it was pretty obvious that I had behavioral differences that made me different from other people, and my parents worked very hard to get me the best help I could. At one point, because autism was not able to, how do I word this? People with autism back in the early 80s, late 80s, and even early 90s did not get the kind of help they do now. Right. Autism, fortunately, was, and ADHD was viewed as, what's the right way of putting this? Viewed as having a mental defect, where you would my dad was even told straight up that most likely I would never drive a car, I would never be able to live on my own, and by the time I was 18, I would probably be living in some sort of asylum in a straitjacket, wearing diapers for the rest of my life. I'm sorry to be blunt.
Well, no, I mean, this is an important part of your story, but wow, that's wild that someone said that to your father.
But then again, I was 3 years old, and this was a different time, so I don't even remember the name, and all I had was my late father's, rest in peace, Dad. All I had was his background on the story, so that's all I have on it. But at the time, when I started training, the mental focus was obviously always important in training, because you need to be able to think about what you're going to do, because as you're taught to protect your opponent and yourself, but you obviously need the mental capacity to think for that. But a learning difference capacity really wasn't thought of back then. So to answer your question, no, that I don't think that was something that came up. However, I will say later in life, for reasons that are his own, and that is his story to tell, Bob Evans gave me probably not just the highest compliment I ever got in professional wrestling, but in life. When he told me straight to my face I was a godsend sent to him, that he truly felt that some higher deity sent me his way to help him prepare for life, and I am internally grateful Bob Evans was probably the best person I could ever ask for as a trainer, and the staff he had at the time were extremely helpful as well. They treated me just as equally as any other of the boys.
That's great. And I didn't know all of that story until you just shared it. So I'm glad you kind of filled in some of the blanks there. Um, do you remember, Stephen, having a discussion maybe with your parents or like with a doctor before you started training? Were there any like concerns that had to be addressed before you started training?
As with a doctor, no, that was not an issue. My parents obviously were very concerned. I was going to do something that I could possibly be permanently injured. It depends if
Sure.
something, and of course, parents are always going to look out for their kids. If you're the greatest athlete on earth, or I probably it's no secret, I never was an Adonis, but I was. I tried to stay ring shape, but I never was going to win a Mr. Olympia contest.
Mhm.
Uh, my parents were obviously concerned, and I will say this: Slam Tech did a very good job. We really didn't focus on. We did talk about what needed we need to do to stay healthy, but as
Mhm.
far as push-ups and sit-ups and all that exercise stuff, that was out of the ring. Most of the in-ring stuff was focused on the in-ring work and the psychology.
Mhm.
That's what we focused on and how a match could work. When I first started, I thought, and he is a very good wrestler, but I thought Loki was the best wrestler of all time.
Mhm.
And this was the honest truth. And Bob Evans was right. I had a lot to learn, and a lot to learn I did because as much as I still think Loki is a good wrestler, as far as best of all time, with all due respect to Mr. Loki, I know that he's probably not, how do I put this? He's at the top of certain lists, but not like be all in all fairness.
So give me the New Year's perspective, Stephen. Who do you think is the all-time best now?
Hmm. Um, as far Brian Danielson, I think his
Interesting.
I like his in ring style, and I think his underdog story is very emotional. I
Mhm.
was captivated what happened 10 years ago
Hmm.
during the whole WrestleMania 30 movement, and I
Right,
still
sure.
and I know that I only have a little bit of time left, but I still hope. My whole reason for getting into wrestling is I just wanted to have 5 minutes with him in the ring, and
Hmm.
I don't know if it's gonna be possible now, but until he like stops wrestling, 2020, not 2020, 2016 possibly was the worst year of my family's life because our father passed away, and
Right.
just went went to went to shell in a handbasket. And then again, 2020 made 2016 look like stealing candy from a kid. I don't know the phrase. Like stealing candy from a
I
baby.
know what you mean.
Yeah, because 2020 was. I thought it was going to be an eye-opening year because everyone remembers 2020 and Baba Walters, and we thought it because 2020 the TV series was an eye-opening um, television show. It was going to be eye-opening. It was, but for all the wrong reasons. That has nothing to do with this conversation, but I just had to get that.
Thank you. Well, let's flash back to like year one of your training. What do you think was the biggest challenge you faced while training? Can you
Oh,
describe it to me?
without question the psychology and just
Huh.
getting it right and trying to learn that how do I put this that this is um, um, this is not an MMA fight. You're
Hmm.
not fighting for a life. Um,
Right.
I learned that I've never been in a fight in my life, but I have seen fights, and I know that they go a lot faster than most MMA fights, and of course wrestling matches. I had to learn that there is a craft to this, and just trying to memorize that. I cannot tell you how long it took me to master a bump correctly. Everyone
Hmm.
was actually very happy when I was able to do 10 in a row for the first time.
What do you
Um,
think was the
oh,
most frustrating thing for you to learn?
that's a good question. Opening up. Obviously, at the time, I really couldn't take. It took a while, but eventually, my body just learned to absorb stuff.
Hmm.
With I hate chops. Everyone hates chops, but if someone were to chop me now, I would be able to take it, even though it would suck. And I'm sure I'm not the only professional wrestler to agree with that statement.
Hmm. And do you remember like what was it that finally kind of turned the page? You went from, I guess, closing up, right, trying to protect yourself to being able to give your body to somebody else for the course of the match. Was there a day where you just had like a sudden realization about it, or you think it just grew on you little by little over time?
Well, this is going to be funny, but I would have to say when how do I word this correctly? When Jakara came to Connecticut for the very first time, and without understanding wrestling, uh, what's the right word? Wrestling, um, I don't know the order of how things work in pro wrestling. I just showed up without being asked, even though apparently a lot of people put in a good word for me. I have been more grateful to not be thrown out of a locker room for just being a very good guy. But
Right.
I in the style there, it made me seeing that first show, Showdown in Crisis Land, made me want
Oh
to
yeah.
up my game so much. That's why I was so like shell bent on becoming part of that organization, just because I felt like I found a home.
Right on. Well, I'm very flattered by that. I'm glad that show made a good impression on you as well. And you don't have to worry. Your good reputation always precedes you.
I live
Uh,
by the motto that I wouldn't say it if I didn't mean it, because when you say something, you should stand by what you mean. Because there are too many people that just talk out on a different part of their head, and I don't want to be one of those people. I want to be known as a non-liar, and I like being able to stand by what I mean. For example, if I say I'm not comfortable going off the top rope because I never took a bump that hard, I really mean that. Uh, because I don't want to hurt the other person, which unfortunately we all found out almost did happen many years ago, which is another story for another time.
well, I do have one more question before I let you go, Stephen. And if you don't remember exactly, that's okay. But could you, if so, estimate how long did you spend training before you had your very first match? Do you
Oh,
remember the amount of time?
as a matter of fact, I do. Um, I started a few days after my 21st birthday on September 21st, 2004. And on April 23rd, 2005, Slam Tech at the time was connected to the now defunct New England Championship Wrestling.
Hmm.
Before that year, it split off and became its own promotion and called Eastern Pro Wrestling.
Right.
Um, did a doubleheader at the old Seacon Congregational Church Hall, which still exists to this day. But we had this gimmick where the students were going to put on a show, and the main event would be a Royal Rumble, and the person that sold the most tickets won. Um, and on that day, I had my very first match in the main event of a show, which is probably I I
That's
pulled a
wild.
I pulled a Dusty Rhodes. I still have the cup and a poster of that day. I would show it to you,
Wow.
but personal information on that wall that I didn't have time to remove, that I didn't want to put on the video because it features my address and everything like that. But
Mhm.
I'm so grateful I still have that cup and that the poster of my very first show. And but I will say this: I didn't have my second match until like that December when I was in a 6-man tag.
Wow.
But
Yeah.
when they put it out, they tested my waters, but it was a very slow pace. When I first started as a cameraman, and then
Mhm.
I became a referee, which I continued to do for like the first uh, 5 to 7 years of my career. At the same time, I was wrestling.
Mhm.
Um, I forget when I officially stopped, but basically that's how I got so much in ring knowledge, being the third man in the ring at the same time, watching other people do it.
Yes.
But
And
I would
I don't know that you know this about yourself, but your reputation, Stephen, has always been that you're always finding a way to help at the shows. And the fact that you referee doesn't surprise me at all, because if they needed a referee and you could do the job, I don't doubt you would have jumped right in there.
I still would. I still miss it. Despite how inactive I've been the last few years, I still love this business and I still hope to give back. And that is something I'm hoping from this video. If I could end on a personal note to
Mhm.
anyone watching this, if you, whatever learning disability, physical disability, mental disability you may have, speak to your parents, speak to your doctors, make sure you have a backup plan in mind. But at the very least, if you truly believe you want to do this, try. The worst thing you could do is not try. Maybe it doesn't work out, maybe it does. But in the end, the worst thing you can do to yourself is not try. Find the right school that will handle your disabilities the best they can. Don't let yourself get taken advantage of, and try. At the very least, try to have your one match, because I promise you, just even if that match in Seekonk back in 2005 was the only match I ever had, I would have been satisfied.
My thanks to the one and only Steve the Turtle Weiner for coming on Till We Make It and sharing so much of his story with us. Appearing on screen right now is a link that will take you to other interviews I've conducted here on the channel covering a wide array of topics. And there's also a link on screen which will take you directly to my Patreon. That orange square will take you over there so that you can keep on learning right now.